Brian Truzzi here with Chesterfield County Department of Parks and Recreation. This morning we are standing directly in front of the Chesterfield County Museum. Now, compared to all the other historic buildings on the Courthouse Green, this is the only building here that does not have historic status because this was built in 1976 during the country's bicentennial. The museum was fitted out with all of the exhibits and opened up to the public in 1977. It's also interesting to note that this museum is an original replica of the first colonial courthouse built here in the county in 1749. And as we tour the museum this morning, we'll be able to focus on a lot of the really unique storyboards and exhibits that focuses on early Native American life, impacts during the Revolutionary and Civil Wars, a number of the unique firsts that happened here in Chesterfield County, focusing on a lot of industrial achievements from the first iron furnace at Falling Creek, the first commercially mined coal, the first railroad, and many more unique items here. This particular museum has not only a large exhibit space towards the front, but towards the back of the museum, as we'll have a chance to see, is really set aside for a changing exhibit space in which we have a variety of different changing exhibits that highlight a variety of unique historical accomplishments in Chesterfield County's history. One of the things next to me here in front of the museum is our brochure rack. So visitors that come to the museum here can pick up a variety of information relating to upcoming programs and events. And also, we have a self-guided walking tour of the historic Courthouse Green. So you can pick up one of these brochures, which has an inset map and will give you a lot more background history of all of the particular sites on the historic Courthouse Green. And wonderful opportunity. If the complex is closed, the visitors can actually learn a lot more about the unique historical accomplishments that happened here on the Courthouse Green. Okay, so we're directly inside the front door of the Chesterfield County Museum. When visitors arrive here, one of the things that they would not think to look at is directly above their head, because we have the original bell from the 1749 colonial courthouse. Now, this bell once resided up top of the cupola above the 1917 courthouse when that was built. And when we were commemorating the 2017 centennial of the 1917 courthouse, this bell, which by the way is the oldest artifact in Chesterfield County, this bell was actually removed from the cupola and went through a very detailed restoration process. And the visitors, when they come into the Chesterfield County Museum, can actually hear the chiming of the bell. So when visitors have a chance to experience all of the artifacts and exhibits here in the museum, one of the more unique things is right inside the door to the left, and we have a small exhibit case filled with a variety of different fossilized bones from whale vertebrae, shark's teeth, and other items. And you may be asking yourself, why on earth would we have something like that in a history museum? The unique concept of this is the fact that millions of years ago, long before the ice flows carved out the areas for the James and the Appomattox rivers that exist today, this entire region was all underwater, and it was teeming with marine life. And inside this case here, we have a variety of different sizes of shark's teeth, even shark's teeth that would have belonged to Megalodon, the largest shark that ever existed. It would have been about the length of 3 or 4 large motor coach buses, the absolute largest mammal that ever swam in the oceans. And the exhibit and the accompanying storyboard here really focuses a lot on what the terrain and landscape was like in present-day Chesterfield County. Okay, so the large diorama case directly behind me here, this focuses a lot on the organizational structure of Chesterfield County. And on May 12, 1749, Chesterfield was actually established. We were created from the southern half of Henrico County. And Chesterfield County derives its name from a man by the name of Philip Dormer Stanhope. He was considered the 4th Earl of Chesterfield, and he was a noted statesman. And when the first individuals were looking at trying to find an individual for the citizens to live up to and admire, certainly Lord Chesterfield was very well known. And Chesterfield County is named after the 4th Earl of Chesterfield. And his title was actually called Lord Chesterfield. Okay, so when the county initially was created, when we were still a colony at that point in 1749, the area was actually divided in what were called parishes. We had the Manchester Parish and the Dale Parish. Eventually, during the time period around the Civil War, the organizational structure changed. Once we acquired our independence from England, we no longer based our structure on parishes. Now we have magisterial districts. And the county originally was broken into 7 magisterial districts, and that was determined to just be too cumbersome. So the county today actually has 5 magisterial districts, and the storyboard directly behind me here gives the visitors a better understanding of how the original structure of the county looked in the 1700s and what we have today. Okay, so standing here in the Chesterfield County Museum, one of the unique exhibit cases we have really focuses on a lot of the earlier Native American settlements that were established here in the colony. And long before the English arrived here, we know that Native American Indian tribes actually utilized the Courthouse Green as a seasonal hunting and camping ground. And one of the major tributaries that runs through here is Coldwater Run. So it provided a water source for them. And many of the Native American tribes that inhabited this region, such as the Algonquin-speaking Appomattox tribe and the Monacan Indians, inhabited this region. The stone tools in this case in front of me here illustrate a lot of the different tools that they would have actually crafted by hand. So a lot of the smaller projectile points would have been used to hunt a lot of game, to put food on the table for them. They had a lot of larger stones that would have been shaped to be used as mauls and sledges and actually axe heads, because they would have been cutting down trees and then carving those trees out with large scrapers to make dugout canoes. And that would have been the primary form of transportation for many of the Native American tribes in the region here. They would have navigated using large dugout canoes. One of the larger items here in the case, this large flat stone, would have been a grinding stone. So the Native American women would be using this to pound corn, to grind that up in a variety of different meal products to produce food for the family. So in addition to all of the stone tools and hunting equipment that the Native Americans would have made, there's also a variety of different items in here that really illustrate a lot of other equipment that would have been used for food gathering purposes. And we know that the Native American Indians didn't allow anything to go to waste. So hides would have been used to fashion clothing. They would have used smaller animal hides to gather fruits and berries for a lot of medicinal purposes. They would have used a lot of the streams to gather all of the oysters, which they would have consumed. Many of the smaller bones from the animals could have been shaped to make needles, fish hooks, a variety of items such as that. And their bedding would have been made from reed mats, made from cattail stalks. So there's a variety of different items we have on display in here that really illustrate the lifestyle of many of the early Native American peoples. Okay, so one of the interesting aspects here in the museum is focusing a lot on the early industrial achievement. And Chesterfield County has a lot of firsts that we're very proud of. And one of those is the establishment of the first iron furnace in the English New World that dates all the way back to 1619. So when the first English settlers were arriving here, the Virginia Company of London wanted to utilize all of the rich, abundant natural resources. And along the banks of Falling Creek, they were actually mining iron ore. And this was going to be shipped back to England. And in 1619, the first expedition was sent over to start building that first iron furnace. Along the way, disaster struck, and so a second expedition was organized by a man by the name of John Berkeley and his son Maurice, and they landed with 21 iron workers, and they built the first iron furnace. Sadly, that iron furnace was destroyed in 1622 by an uprising of Native American Indians throughout the region that laid waste to a number of the different communities. But to my right here in this case are a number of unique artifacts that really highlight the importance of the iron furnace. The large crucible and ladle that we have here in the case would actually been used in the process of smelting iron ore. And they were actually making pig iron, which would have been about the shape of small sections of railroad track. And when it came out of the oven, it had a little tail on the end that resembled a pigtail. Also, towards the front of the case, you'll see large iron spikes. Those would have been actually products that would have been made at the furnace at Falling Creek. And it was really the first opportunity and expedition to really establish the first iron furnace in what we now consider North America. So in the case here, this large piece of iron slag is a great example of a lot of the evidence that was actually recovered at Falling Creek. And the archaeologist with the Falling Creek Ironworks Foundation worked on a major excavation at the site, and they were coming across a lot of evidence of this iron slag, which in their minds possibly would indicate that the furnace was actually had an opportunity to be put into blast, which basically would mean that would have been the last process to actually create finished products from the iron furnace. This more than likely would have been just prior to when the furnace was actually destroyed by the Native American uprising. Okay, so the second major industry that we have here in Chesterfield County was going to be the discovery of coal that dates back to this region from the early 1700s. And some of the first individuals who discovered coal would have been French Huguenots that exposed these coal seams on the roads from the ruts from the wagon wheels. And early on in the 1700s, no one had any idea the abundance of bituminous coal that existed through this area. And we sit on one of the richest coal veins in the country, known as the Richmond Coalfield Basin. And in the middle 1700s, individuals were mining coal on a commercial basis. And all of this coal led, surprisingly, to the establishment of two remarkable transportation improvements to the county. The first one would have been the creation of the first hard surface road in the entire state of Virginia to transport coal from here to Richmond, and that would have been known as the Midlothian Turnpike. That was actually a toll road for the coal miners to haul coal in large wagons pulled by horses or mules to the market. Later on in 1831, all of the abundance of this coal led to the establishment of the first railroad in the entire state of Virginia. And this was known as the Chesterfield Railroad. It was a gravity-fed rail line because at that point they did not have steam locomotives. And this would have been an all-day process to haul coal from Midlothian to Richmond and then back to the mines. But there was so much of an abundance of coal that there was not a monopoly held on this. These veins of coal were about anywhere from 10 to 50 feet thick, and how they accessed this coal was very remarkable, which makes our story special. And this was the birthplace of deep mining, in which they dug vertical shafts anywhere from 500 to 650 feet straight down to tap into these veins of coal. Off to my left here, there are a variety of different artifacts that point to the evidence of the coal mining. The large wheel in the center of the case here was actually built on top of a large wooden apparatus called a headstock, powered by ropes and a large steam engine. And these wheels would have lowered miners down into the mines, brought them back up, along with buckets of coal. And in the 1700s, before miners had a lot of safety equipment, the first lamp would have been this small lamp right towards the front here of the case. That would have been filled with oil, and that would have been hung directly on the top of their cap. Their headgear was really nothing more than what we would think of as a modern ball cap today, coated in creosote to keep their head dry from water trickling from up top through the rock surface. You'll also notice a large chunk of coal there in the case, a bituminous coal, something that would have taken millions of years to actually form. There's also a head from a pickaxe, and the small coins in the front are actually mine tokens. And the old adage of coal miner owing his soul to the company store was very true, because every purchase that the miner needed to make, he would need to be using those mine tokens to purchase food, equipment, gear at the company store that the mine superintendent would have actually owned. So coal mining played a very large part in the industrial history here of Chesterfield County. Okay, so in addition to a lot of the other industrial history here, we have a very remarkable history in regards to early development of mills in the region here. And dating back to the early 1600s, there was a lot of evidence of water-powered mills that would have existed through the area here. Some of the first mills that were in existence would have been tanneries and lumber mills. As the region started to expand and all of the abundance of timber through the region here, there was a huge need to clear all of the land as better road networks were being constructed and more people were moving into the region. Lumber mills became a very important type of industry here. So there was evidence of a lot of huge tanneries, lumber mills, and water mills that would have been built right along any major confluence of water, whether that would be Falling Creek, the James, or the Appomattox. By the 1800s, a lot of those smaller lumber mills are going to be replaced with huge textile mills. The panel directly behind me here illustrates some of the largest mills that ever existed in the region here. And throughout the villages of Ettrick and Metellica, some of the largest textile mills would have been in operation. Now, many of these textile mills would be producing cotton, hemp, wool, and flax materials. The mills at the Metellica Manufacturing Company were some of the largest in the area here. And they were producing some of the richest types of cotton and textiles during the Civil War period. And in Ettrick, they had one of the largest paper mills, and they were producing paper for the Petersburg publishers at that period. During the American Civil War, the mills in Ettrick were producing the majority of the cotton for sheets for the hospitals for wounded Confederate soldiers during that time period. Chesterfield also has the oldest documented mill in the country, and that would have been the Swift Creek Mill, which is in present-day Colonial Heights. And that dates back to 1663. That is a Virginia historical landmark and is also on the National Register of Historic Places. In addition to textile mills, we know that they were bottling water in the county here. We have Lithia Springs that was actually producing bottled water for county residents during that time period. So here in the Chesterfield County Museum, we have a variety of different exhibits that really illustrate the impact of major wars and the outcome they had to citizens here in the county. Obviously, the first major engagement that would have impacted the residents would have been the Revolutionary War. And at that point, Chesterfield was in its infancy. We had only been established less than 20 years when this entire area around us would have been part of a huge complex and would have been the center point for training for the armies of Virginia, Georgia, and the Carolinas. And when Governor Thomas Jefferson brings in a man by the name of Frederick von Steuben, a Prussian drill master, to train and equip these troops, he is taking raw recruits. Some of them would have been farmers, school teachers, blacksmiths, who knew nothing about life of a military soldier, and many of these men went on to fight in various engagements through the region here, particularly near present-day Petersburg, near Blandford Church. They were engaging British forces of Major Phillips and Benedict Arnold's British troops at the time. Directly above me here, you will see a large painting of the training here at the complex and depicting the colonial courthouse and von Steuben training the troops, preparing them for military drill. So one of the oldest historic homes that we have in Chesterfield County would be Eppington, which was actually built in 1768 by Francis Epps VI. Now, he would have been Thomas Jefferson's brother-in-law, and Eppington is a county landmark, is a Virginia state landmark, and also is on the National Register of Historic Places. Each year, we hold an annual event at Eppington Plantation, known as our Eppington Heritage Days. But the panel directly behind me, to my left, actually addresses a lot of the rich history of Eppington. And while there were no major engagements that were fought in that part of the county, the Epps family actually did leave Eppington during the time of the war and didn't return until the war officially concluded, finding their house was in perfect condition. Another really precious landmark we have here in the county is Magnolia Grange. The exhibit case to my right really addresses a lot of the unique archaeology that was discovered at Magnolia Grange. That house was actually built in 1822 by William Winfrey and also is a Virginia landmark and listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The fragments of bowls that are in this case here were actually recovered when they were actually digging the foundation for the parking lot. Because in the 1800s, William Winfrey had a tavern, and they were coming across fragments of these punch bowls that the residents at the tavern would have been enjoying a variety of punch and other liquors at the time. And we were able to take pieces of these punch bowls to fabricate these and make reproductions that were actually sold in the gift shop at Magnolia Grange years ago. So these are two very historically important historic homes that we preserve and interpret in the county today. So the second major engagement that obviously impacted Chesterfield County was the American Civil War. And throughout most of the war, the residents here in the county were spared. But by 1862 and 1864, the war was going to come to various portions of Virginia here, mainly Chesterfield County. The items in the exhibit case directly behind me here focus on a lot of the evidence that was actually recovered from the region. We have a variety of different types of artillery shells and projectiles, some of the different musket balls. There are personal diaries and Bibles that were carried by troops who fought in the battles in 1864. There are belt buckles and buttons from uniforms. But probably the most unique and precious artifact in this case is the sword that is in the back. That sword was actually belonged to General A.P. Hill, one of General Robert E. Lee's Corps commanders, and the sword was actually presented to General Hill in 1861 by his father. General Hill carried that sword throughout the entire 4 years of the war, only to be killed less than a week before the war officially concluded south of Petersburg in Dinwiddie County. The items here in this case and the soldier directly next to that really illustrates a lot of the clothing and equipment that the troops during the Civil War would have been outfitted and carried with them into battle. When the Union Navy actually attempted to assault the city of Richmond, and they bypassed one of the Confederate batteries known as Drury's Bluff or Fort Darling. The exhibit panel directly behind me illustrates the impact of that battle with a lot of different evidence of some of the large artillery pieces that would have been installed there to defend the river. There were a number of Union vessels, including the ironclad vessels and the USS Galena, that made an assault, but their barrels were not able to angle high enough to do any damage to the Confederate batteries on the bluff. So the Union assault was never able to bypass that position to assault Richmond. This would have been one of the first engagements here throughout the region. And during the Civil War, a lot of the coal that was actually mined in the Midlothian area was actually being shipped while close to home to Bologna Arsenal and Foundry to produce a lot of weapons and equipment for the Confederate Army. A lot of that coal was used to cast cannons and projectile points and even produce railroad track for the Confederacy. And all of that would have happened locally here at the Bologna Arsenal and Foundry. So during the American Civil War, after 1862, the next major threat to residents in this region would have been in 1864. In May of that year, the Army of the James actually landed at one of the most historic enclaves that we have in the area here, a little place called Bermuda 100 that actually dates back to 1614 as the oldest settlement in English North America. Close to 38,000 Union troops landed at Bermuda 100, marched inland, and throughout the region here, we have a variety of different Civil War sites that the department preserves and interprets. And there were several large battles that were fought throughout Chesterfield County in 1864. One of the most significant battles was the Battle of Ware Bottom Church that actually led to a new line of fortifications known as the Howlett Line, and that systematically prevented General Benjamin Butler's Union troops from making any more advances. And he spent the bulk of his time digging what was called the Dutch Gap Canal as a way to bypass a lot of the Confederate batteries along the bluff. And even at places like Henricus Historical Park, we have evidence of a number of those Confederate batteries that are preserved within the wood lines close to the entrance to that park drive. Also in Chesterfield County, we have 4 individuals who actually hailed from Chesterfield. These men served as generals in the Confederate Army and served with distinction. So we have a lot of evidence that points to the battles in 1862 and even 1864 and the aftermath and impact that that had on the residents of the county here. So directly in front of the main gallery here at the County Museum, we have a reproduction of our general store exhibit. And this provides the visitors a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about what life was like at the turn of the century here in Chesterfield County. As we tour the general store, we'll be able to share a lot of some of the old items, nostalgic of yesteryear, that many times we may only have a chance to see if we maybe dine at a Cracker Barrel restaurant and we see all those old items hanging on the wall. Long ago, in the 1900s, general stores would have been the place for one-stop shopping. If you needed to purchase tools or buy cloth to make clothing for the children, it could be a place where you could purchase medicine if a family member was ill. You could pick up your mail, and it was usually the only place that actually had a telephone, and you would have to walk to the general store to actually make a phone call. So join us as we reveal a lot of the unique history within this old general store exhibit. Right here in the general store we have a variety of unique items from yesteryear. The first item here is the old washing machine. This would have been a great example to demonstrate how that would have been something that you'd have to basically stand at that, unlike modern washing machines. The large handle towards the back would have turned the agitator in there to wash all your clothes. And of course, if people wanted to use hot water, that meant that would have had to have been boiled on the stove and then add hot water to wash all of your clothes. When people were going to be taking a bath, long before we had indoor plumbing, they had a wash basin, which would have been the long oblong item resting against the wall. And typically for large families, the oldest member of the family would bathe first. And so when it got time for the younger child to bathe, that water would be looking rather dark and dingy, and that is how the phrase originates, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." That would be an example of how people would have bathed with that wash basin. Off to the far edge over here we have a couple butter churns, and for those people who were fortunate enough to live on a farm, you would be able to milk your own cows and be able to take all that cream and make your own butter. This also would be the place where you would have an opportunity to make a phone call. So the old style wall phone that you have there, if a family member called to the general store and you came in to purchase some supplies, the store owner might pass along a note that your aunt or grandma had called and you needed to call them back, long before people had their own phones in their own house. And also on the wall you see a variety of different types of tools and implements. This could be a place where someone could come to buy saws, a variety of different horseshoes and hand tools, ice picks, a variety of different equipment that you would need on the farm. So directly behind the counter here at the general store, a lot of unique items we rarely see today. And for a mercantile store owner, that individual would have been utilizing a large cash register like the one we have here. And long before credit cards were in fashion, the store owner would keep a huge logbook, and he would keep documented records of what people paid for something. And if you came in and you needed to purchase items that were more than what you had with you, he would keep that documented in his journal book. And the next time you came in, he would give you an idea of how much you might still owe on your purchase. Directly behind me here, we have a couple unique items. There are a pair of old-style ice skates that you would literally strap on to the bottom of your shoes. Very different from modern ice skates. You also have an example of an old-style typewriter here to really sort of think about how technology has changed for us. For many people, you'll recognize a variety of different types of labels of products. So if someone got ill, you could purchase a lot of medicine here. There's a lot of examples of children's toys. Fleischmann's margarine here, Pepsi-Cola products, Maxwell House coffee, items that we're certainly familiar with today that were popular during that time period. And over here on the wall on the far left, you'll get an idea of prices from 1905 in the Richmond area. A can of corn was only 5 cents, a dozen lemons 10 cents, etc. So life in the country would have been very different at the turn of the century in the early 1900s, and general stores was really the one-stop place to purchase anything families would need. This part of the museum is dedicated for our changing exhibit space, and over the years we've incorporated a variety of different exhibits here focusing on early African American history with churches and schools, World War II exhibits. This particular exhibit was actually set aside in 2018 on Veterans Day when we commemorated the World War I centennial. So the items in this area here are going to focus on the life of the soldier during World War I. And in the case directly in front of me here, we have a variety of really unique items that the visitors will have a chance to see, such as a trench rattle that would have been used to alert troops of incoming gas attacks. There is a trench periscope that sits directly on top of the glass case to allow an individual to peer over the top of the fortifications without endangering getting shot. You have examples of gas masks that would have been issued to the troops to save themselves from incoming chlorine gas or mustard gas assaults, and a variety of different items that were actually on loan here for this particular exhibit. So in addition to a lot of the other personal items, in some of the other cases here, we have examples of a lot of the different weapons that would have been utilized by the troops during World War I. Samples of trench knives and bayonets that would have been issued to the men. Of course, World War I was also going to be a proving ground for a lot of new weapons. This would have been the first war where we have basically tanks that were used, and no longer would cavalry charges be essential. You have a lot of long-range artillery, and examples of the large artillery shells in the far case are examples of that. Many troops would be issued a lot of personal mess kits to take care of all of their meals for them. And clothing really had not changed a whole lot since the Civil War, being issued heavy woolen garments, and the helmets that the troops would have been issued for the American troops would have protected them a little bit better than some of the other forces serving during the war. Okay, so the mannequin in the corner here at the museum really illustrates to the visitors the type of clothing and equipment that the troops would have been issued here. And all of these troops from Chesterfield that were going to be sent to Camp Lee for their drill and instruction would be issued all of their equipment. So heavy woolen uniforms, as you see here, the large bag draped across the soldier's front would have been his gas mask bag. And that would need to be carried with him over the front of his body, so he would have easy access to that whenever gas attacks would be issued. To prevent mud and dirt and grime from getting down in their boots, they wore puttees, which would be wrapped directly around the ankles and up to the thighs. They would have their ammunition pack draped around them, and any other equipment that they would need when they would leave the actual trenches during battle.